What if your anxiety, your brain fog, even your sleep issues aren't starting in your brain at all, but are starting in your gut? And I know that it sounds a little out there, but this is actually one of the most researched areas in gut health right now. There's even a term for it called psychobiotic, which refers to the connection between your gut, your brain, and your mood. While we tend to think of mood as something that happens just in your brain, the fact is 95% of serotonin is actually made in your gut. And your gut actually has an entire biological factory that produces molecules that are responsible for your mood, your mental clarity, and your sleep. And today I'm going to walk you through how this system actually works, what disrupts it, and what it takes to support it. Hi, I'm Lauren Grace, acupuncturist, integrative medicine physician, and co-founder of Healus. And during my time in practice, I worked with a lot of patients that were struggling with anxiety and depression. Many of them had already tried everything from medication to meditation. And while they found some relief, something still felt incomplete. And to be clear, conditions like anxiety and depression are complex. There are a lot of factors involved, from your hormones to your lifestyle to past experiences and traumas. But one system that is often overlooked is the gut. And in my opinion, it should be one of the first places we start. Because when your gut microbiome is off, it can directly impact how your brain functions, including how your body regulates key neurotransmitters. And that all comes back to something called the gut-brain connection. Now, everyone has experienced the gut-brain connection in the past. Think of the last time you were nervous, you probably had that butterflies in the stomach feeling, or if you just received bad news, you may immediately feel nauseous or like you were punched in the gut. That's the gut-brain connection. And one of the main ways that your gut and brain communicates is through something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in your body. It runs from your brain stem down through your chest and your abdomen, connecting your brain to your digestive system. You can think of it as the communication highway between your gut and your brain. And that communication goes in both directions. Your brain sends signals down to your gut, influencing things like gut motility, digestion, and the function of your gut lining. And your gut sends signals back up to your brain about what's happening in your body. And here's the part that most people don't realize. A large majority of those signals are coming from your gut to your brain. So your gut isn't just responding to your brain. It's constantly sending information to your brain about things like inflammation, nutrient status, and the overall state of your gut environment. And those signals can strongly influence how your brain functions, including your mood, your stress response, and your sleep. Now let me explain what your gut is actually producing when it's healthy and what it stops producing when it's not. Your gut bacteria, when they are diverse and balanced, play a major role in regulating the chemicals that govern your mental and emotional state. Serotonin is one of them. As I mentioned earlier, 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And this is by specialized cells in the gut lining that are responding directly to your gut environment. GABA is another one. This is your brain's calming neurotransmitter. It's what tells your nervous system that it is safe to slow down, that it's safe to rest and relax. Now, certain gut bacteria can produce GABA and influence GABA signaling, which means your gut can directly influence how calm or how anxious you feel. You also have dopamine pathways, which are involved with motivation, reward, and pleasure. Your gut helps to regulate the availability of key precursors that your brain uses to produce dopamine. And then there's something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is a protein that your brain needs to grow new neurons, to form memories, and maintain cognitive resilience. It's your brain's ability to adapt and recover. And BDNF is strongly influenced by one particular compound made in the gut. And that compound is something called butyrate. Now, butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that's produced in the gut when you digest and ferment fiber. If you think of your microbiome as a garden and the bacteria in it are the workers, and the fiber you eat is their food. And butyrate is essentially the compost that they generate. It's rich, nourishing, and it fuels the rest of the microbiome. Now, butyrate does several things for your gut directly, like lowering inflammation, repairing and strengthening the gut lining, improving peristalsis and digestion. But butyrate doesn't just act in the gut, it acts in the brain as well. And in the context of mood and mental health, butyrate is doing several things at once. First, butyrate can cross into the brain and it helps to maintain the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. This barrier is like your brain's protective filter. It helps to regulate what gets in and what stays out of the brain's environment. And compounds like butyrate can help influence how resilient and stable that barrier is. Butyrate also influences gene expression in the brain by inhibiting an enzyme called histone deacetylase. In simpler terms, it helps regulate how certain genes are turned on and off, including those involved in stress response and inflammation. Butyrate also helps reduce neuroinflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation in the brain is increasingly being recognized as a contributing factor for mood disorders, especially in cases that don't fully respond to conventional treatment. And butyrate helps to regulate this inflammatory signaling that drives this process. Butyrate also supports the production of BDNF in the brain, that brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is a key protein for neuroplasticity. That's your brain's ability to adapt, form new connections, and recover from stress. So while butyrate is supporting your gut, it's also influencing your brain directly in ways that regulate your sleep, your mood, your stress response, and your overall resilience. Now, this is the part that I find the most interesting clinically, and it's the part that's often missing when it comes to conversations around mental health. When butyrate production drops, which can happen with things like antibiotic use, low fiber diets, high processed foods, and chronic stress, the gut lining can start to become compromised. Increased permeability allows for compounds like LPS or lipopolysaccharides, which are inflammatory fragments from gut bacteria, to move into the bloodstream. And when that happens, your immune system recognizes it as a threat. It responds by producing inflammatory signals and activates your stress response system, including the HPA axis. When that happens, cortisol rises and your stress response increases. And over time, elevated stress hormones can start to affect the gut. It can start to alter the microbiome and reduce the bacteria responsible for producing compounds like butyrate. So you end up in a loop. Stress reduces butyrate production. Lower butyrate affects the gut barrier. That allows inflammatory signals to increase, which activates the stress response. And the cycle continues. And when you are stuck in that loop, you can start to experience things like anxiety, low mood, brain fog, disrupted sleep, until something interrupts that cycle. So if we take anxiety, for example, when butyrate production drops, your gut environment shifts, and that can influence how your body regulates calming neurotransmitters like GABA. And your nervous system really relies on GABA to feel safe and regulated. At the same time, your gut lining can start to become more permeable, which allows compounds like LPS, those inflammatory fragments, to enter into circulation. Your immune system responds to that as a threat, which means inflammatory signals start to activate and your stress response increases. And those signals can influence the brain, including activating the brain's immune cells and creating a state of high alert. So your nervous system starts behaving as if something's wrong, even when there is no existential threat. And when the signal is coming from the body, it's not something that you can just think your way out of, because the driver is biological, not psychological. And in many cases, it's coming from the gut. Now this loop affects sleep in a similar way. Now this cycle affects sleep in a similar way because the gut is very much connected to your sleep. And there are two main pathways here. The first involves serotonin and melatonin. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, which is your primary sleep hormone. And while most serotonin in the body is produced in the gut, your brain also has to produce a small amount of its own supply to generate melatonin and keep it on schedule. So when the gut is dysregulated, sleep signaling can become disrupted. And this is when people often feel tired but wired at the same time. The second pathway is the stress response through the HPA axis. When inflammatory signals increase, like we see with LPS in circulation, your body activates its stress response and cortisol rises. And cortisol and deep sleep do not work together well. So a pattern that you'll see very often is people can fall asleep easily, but they wake up in the middle of the night and have a hard time ever falling back to sleep. And what's happening there is you have a spike of cortisol too early. you should have more cortisol first thing in the morning to naturally wake you up. But when the cycle gets dysregulated, you start to have a lot more cortisol spike in the middle of the night. And then there's brain fog, which is one of the most commonly dismissed symptoms that I see in practice. People are often told it's just fatigue or stress or you're getting older, but in many cases there is a biological component to it. Inflammatory signaling, especially when it originates in the gut, can affect how efficiently neurons communicate. And the result is exactly what people describe: slower thinking, difficulty finding words, trouble focusing, feeling mentally foggy. This isn't just in your head, it's often physiological. And clinically, it is something that improves when the gut environment is supported and inflammation reduces. So when it comes to things like anxiety, low mood, sleep disturbances, and brain fog, your gut health can play a significant role. It's not the only factor, but it is a major one. And one of the key players in that system is butyrate. Now, how do you raise your butyrate levels? The first step is fiber. Eating a lot of fiber, and I mean a lot, like a good 30 grams. Now, if you already have a gut compromise, that's not the easiest thing to do. Sometimes eating a lot of fiber when you already have inflammation in your gut can make your symptoms worse. So it's a little tricky. In that case, butyrate supplementation can be really helpful. And when you're looking to supplement butyrate, the most common form of butyrate that you're going to see on the market is something called sodium butyrate. And I'll be honest, sodium butyrate is okay. It's not the best, and the issue that you run into with sodium butyrate is, one, it is affected by stomach acid, so you are going to lose some in the digestion process. And two, it's absorbed very fast and usually absorbed in the upper intestinal tract, so it rarely makes it any lower. And if you really want to activate those cells that produce serotonin, you want to make sure that you have butyrate absorbed along the entire intestinal tract. At Healus, this is why we use something called tributyrin instead. Tributyrin is a triglyceride form of butyrate, and it's the most stable and bioavailable form of butyrate. Tributyrin is also absorbed very slowly along the entire intestinal tract. At Healus, we created a tributyrin supplement for our patients when we were in clinical practice called the Complete Biotic. And we actually use a liquid tributyrin, and that's because liquid tributyrin is more potent and pure than like powdered forms of tributyrin. And we put it in a patented delayed release capsule. Now, this capsule is designed to withstand stomach acid, and it doesn't open until it reaches a certain pH in the small intestine, which is going to allow for the most optimal absorption. So if you are looking to supplement with butyrate to support your neurotransmitter production and the gut-brain connection, I would recommend going with a tributyrin form, because in this case, absorption really matters. And remember, butyrate is just one part of a healthy gut. Eating a nutritious diet, cutting out inflammatory food, all of those things are also going to influence the health of your microbiome. And like I said earlier, gut health is just one influence when it comes to mental health. It's a big influence, but there are other factors. Hormones are a big one. Women should be testing their hormones throughout their lifetime, especially if you were in your 40s and going through perimenopause like me. Definitely get your hormones checked because they will absolutely affect your mood and your sleep. And men too, a dip in testosterone is going to have an impact on your mood. Another key to both gut and brain health is learning how to regulate your nervous system, especially if you have experienced past trauma or years of chronic stress. Now, I realize regulating your nervous system is easier said than done, and this can look different for everyone. But working with a therapist, practicing mindfulness techniques like meditation and breath work, EFT tapping is also a great practice, great for regulating your nervous system. I highly recommend that. But finding things that you can do every day that are going to naturally help to calm you, help you de-stress and relax. Now, the point of this video was not to dismiss any conventional treatment that you are doing for your mental health. Please continue to work with the experts on that. And the point is not to dismiss these other factors like hormones and nervous system regulation, but to really integrate it all together with gut health and to recognize that gut health really does have a major impact on your mental and emotional state, especially if you've tried all the other things. If you already have a mindfulness practice and you've already addressed your hormones and you're still struggling, look to your gut, because that is the piece that'll tie it all together. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you have questions about the gut-brain connection or want to share some of your own experience, please drop it in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, if you could give it a like, that would be amazing. And if you think the information in this video could benefit someone you know, please share it. You can find more about everything we discussed in the description below, including our butyrate supplement, the Complete Biotic. Thank you so much for watching and have a beautiful day.